I appreciate your thoughts about Whitehead's idealist tendencies, let's say, even though he calls his philosophy organic realism. And I appreciate your pushback in regard to this notion of emergence, of, you know, organization out of what Thompson calls noise, or the emergence of mind out of matter, or of consciousness out of merely material stuff. So I want to address that, but let's start with the idealist aspect of Whitehead's thought. I think you're right. Often, some interpreters of Whitehead will emphasize the inheritance of the objectified past, right? In other words, already perished experiences are taken up into each new moment of experience through prehension. They're felt, and they have a certain momentum, and they push us forward. And Whitehead says this is like efficient causality, right? Now, in addition to the prehension of the past, there's what we could call the ingression of the future, which, rather than being a push, is a pull. It's a lure. And what's luring us are these ideas. And concrescence for Whitehead, which is, his, it's the keystone of his whole philosophy, right? It holds the architecture of his system together, and concrescence is the growing together of the perished past and the potential future. And the potential future comes to us in the form of forms. It comes to us in the form of what Whitehead calls eternal objects. And Whitehead is a realist, both in the sense that he wants to take the momentum of the past seriously, right? The world is out there, and Whitehead says, look, if you haven't been tackled in rugby, like he literally says this to an idealist that he was co-teaching with once at Harvard. I wish I could remember his name. It may have been Hawking, actually. But in any event, Whitehead says to him he's just frustrated by the idealist, abstract stance that this other philosopher was taking to the world. And Whitehead's like, look, if you've ever been tackled in rugby, that is the real, right? It literally whacks you in the face. So Whitehead's a realist in the sense that he thinks the environment is out there, and we are at least partially constituted by the streaming in, the echo of the waves of the past crashing into the present are inescapable. But Whitehead is also a realist in another sense. He's a realist about ideas. And, if you go back a few centuries, several centuries, there's this important debate in medieval European philosophy between the nominalists and the realists. And the nominalists thought that ideas were just names. And like the empiricists later, the nominalists would say that we have these general ideas, we have these abstract types or categories, but they are derived from our experience, our sensory experience of particulars. And these universals that we sort of, experience a bunch of things that seem kind of circular. None of them are perfect circles, obviously, because a perfect circle doesn't exist, either in the physical world or in some ideal world for the nominalist. Rather, we kind of imagine the circle as an abstraction that's a generalization of the circular-like shapes that we've seen in our sensory environment. A mathematician, of course, is going to have a lot of problems with this, and it's very obvious, I think, to mathematical minds, to those who are trained in mathematical thinking, that the abstract entities that one interacts with are not simply found in experience. They're generated by an intuitive and intellectually intuitive process that transcends any given experience. I think that's clear. I mean, I'm not mathematically adept enough to confirm this, but I take the word of many mathematicians when they describe the process of mathematical discovery. And Whitehead certainly was, he was inducted into the Royal Society not because of his work as a philosopher. It's the Royal Society of Science. They inducted him into that storied community of scientists because of his work in mathematics. He published a book called Universal Algebra in 1898, and that is what, got him renown among the community of scientists and mathematicians. And then he began his work with Russell. In any event, Whitehead is a realist about the outside world, but he's also a realist about ideas. And I appreciate your attempt to sort of balance the state of inheriting Whitehead's thought, Andrew, because there is this overemphasis on the physical side, because we live in such a materialistic culture. Our common sense is so materialistic. Of course, we're going to look at Whitehead's philosophy of organism and think, oh yeah, he's really all about the flow of energy. It's like, well, yeah, but he's also about eternal ideas that give shape to the flow of energy, that help to channel it and canalize it, which is a word Whitehead borrows from Bergson. People think of Bergson too as a vitalist or something, but he's really more of a Neoplatonist. Bergson was, I think, giving a evolutionary spin to Plotinus's emanationist philosophy, and so there's a deep idealism even in Bergson's, what gets called biologism, right, or vitalism. So thank you for bringing balance. We can be realists about ideas and about reality. And then in terms of emergence, I would just want to briefly say that Thompson doesn't think that consciousness could emerge from just mere physical stuff. He doesn't think that mind comes from chaos just randomly. I think for Thompson, he'll point out, I think elsewhere in this book, and certainly in his other books, that noise is always relative. What appears to be noise for one state of consciousness, let's say, for another state or kind of consciousness or mode of consciousness is not chaos but order. And so, Thompson will write in other books about how the industrial mode of production, it creates a lot of pollution, right, which is its noise into the informational system of the Earth's ecology. But there have been events in the past, in the evolutionary history of the Earth, when anaerobic bacteria were producing all of this oxygen as a result of their metabolism, and that oxygen turned out to be pretty toxic to themselves. But so that oxygen at that point, when it was driving the life that existed on this planet a couple billion years ago into extinction, it was noise. The oxygen was noise, right? But then some endosymbiosis happened and some mutations occurred, and all of a sudden aerobic organisms emerged that could harness the noise, that could interpret the noise of oxygen into information, that allowed them to level up, in a sense. More complex biochemistry became possible because of the extra electrons that oxygen has, and all of a sudden chaos becomes not just order, but a higher state of order than had pre-existed. Higher, deeper, more interconnected, more networked. So I think when Thompson talks about the emergence of order out of noise, or organization out of chaos, we shouldn't absolutize what he means by chaos, right? It's always relative to the mode of organization from which you are trying to apprehend it. And in Whitehead's scheme of thought, think about what he calls the cosmic epoch. Beyond our cosmic epoch, Whitehead says, none of the norms of nature that we have recognized apply. There is something approaching pure chaos, and Whitehead's search for a mathematical account of the extensive continuum in process and reality is his attempt to get clear on what is truly metaphysical, meaning it's true in general of existence even beyond our cosmic epoch. There are many cosmic epochs, in an indefinite number, and we can only know about ours, except for these very abstract, geometrical, really topological formulas that Whitehead wants to, he attempts to derive them in process and reality, and that's a whole unfinished project. But, I guess this is, for Whitehead, the tension between his idealist and realist poles. Right? The idealist in him wants the mathematical formalism, the algebraic account of the nature of process. He wants to know how wholes and parts relate. What are the principles of congruence that allow micro and macrocosm to coexist? He thinks we can find this, but he also acknowledges the creative advance, the evolutionary adventure, where it's not clear what's coming next. It's not clear. He's very humble about the difficulty of finding this underlying form, because he knows that we're in a cosmic epoch and that all of our thinking and all of our sensing are in fact contingent upon the unique history of this cosmic epoch. And so other cosmic epochs have different perceptual and conceptual instruments by which they participate in the making of their world. So just, more ideas to chew on. Sorry I've gone over about twice as long as I intended to, but hopefully you found that helpful.